This is the Church of St. Paul in the Desert.
In the name of God, Amen. Please. Every year on the last Sunday after the Epiphany, before Lent begins, we hear the story of the Transfiguration. Now, the Feast of the Transfiguration actually happens in August, but usually on a weekday, and we kind of gloss it rather quickly. Occasionally it falls on Sunday, and it actually takes precedent over that Sunday. But it's important enough for us to make note and recognize that there's something that happens here that we need to take note of. It is a moment in time, and as with most mountaintop experiences, we can't handle too much more than that momentary glance. We know them, all of us know them at some moment in time, where a puzzle fits together, where all of a sudden we recognize whatever schema it is that we've struggled with, it fits together. But it only happens momentarily. And so, those mountaintop experiences are limited, but most of us have experienced them at one time or the other. The other thing to remember is that Lent is actually sandwiched between two mountaintops, the Mount of Transfiguration and Mount Calvary. And Lent is that time for reflection, for prayer, to remember our purpose as the holy people of God, and renew and make within us a clean heart, as the psalm goes. But the Feast of the Transfiguration and this Transfiguration story from Luke is different from Matthew and Mark, in that there is a sense of prayer. They went to pray. And that's an important addition that happens in Luke that doesn't happen in Matthew and Mark. And it's important for us to recognize, and I think the symbolism of those wonderful mobiles are a reminder for us to pray. Yesterday at the 4:00 service, a young couple asked if I would bless some Anglican rosaries. And I said, well, I'll say a prayer. I happen to agree with Andrew. They've been blessed because of their purpose. But one of the things I said in that prayer was, maybe they be an opening and an opportunity to renew your relationship with God and to deepen that relationship. And I think that there are times when we kind of think it's a one-dimensional, one-way street. It's me talking to God and God doing what I'd really like him to do. Not always the way it's supposed to happen, but it's one of those things that we kind of think will happen. But the Transfiguration is a moment in time that Peter and James and John become privy to the fact that Jesus' true nature and true purpose is yet to be fulfilled. We hear the story in Exodus of the theophany of God and the fact that people were terrified when Moses came down the mountain, and was glowing. There is a sense of that glow that one has in encountering the holiness of God. And then we have this story of these three who recognize each other. There's always been that question in my mind, how did they know it was Moses and Elijah? But that's another story. But I ask the question nonetheless. But there is recognition. And there is also an awareness that it is the law and the prophets and the fulfillment of the new covenant in Jesus. Elijah and Moses know the glory of God and recognize that he must go to Jerusalem, as we will travel in our own ways to Jerusalem through Lent. Somebody the other day said that we shouldn't call Lent a journey. To me, it's an individual journey about rediscovering a right relationship and renewing my sense of who I am called to be as the holy people of God. I think that one of the things that is unique about Epiphany is that we know that it's the manifestation of Christ to the Gentile world, to all of us. But there is that moment at Jesus' baptism where the clouds part, and there is this, not conversation, monologue from God directed at Jesus, where he says, in fact, "You are my son, my beloved, with whom I am well pleased." It is directed to Jesus. On the Mount of Transfiguration, it is directed to us. It is clearly directed to us. This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him. Listen to him. And so there is that invitation. But we have in the midst of this story perception and reality and mystery. The moment is but a moment and passes, but the mystery remains. The mystery remains. And yet we have been privy for a moment to glimpse who this Jesus is, the glory of the Godhead, and a recognition of his purpose. The Mount of Transfiguration is momentary and is important for those who would listen and hear and perceive who this Jesus is. And at some levels, perception is everything. But how do we recognize? What is it that we perceive? What has actually happened? And that's for each of us to discern for ourselves. There is that one of those famous, if you will, Charlie Brown moments. Charlie Brown and Linus and Lucy are lying on their backs, looking at the clouds. And Lucy asks Linus, "So what do you see up there?" And Linus says, "Well, over there I see British Honduras, and up there is Thomas Eaton, a famous painter and sculptor, and over there is the stoning of Stephen and Paul standing by." And he stops. And Lucy says, "That's great, Linus. And Charlie Brown, what do you see?" And Charlie Brown responds, "I was going to say I saw a horsey and a ducky, but maybe not." What do we see? What do we perceive? Do we recognize that that perception has to be not just of the mind, but of the heart? The recognition, the openness, the opportunity for a deeper relationship. How often it is we miss the point. I am reminded in the story of the Transfiguration that the truth is revealed momentarily, but we can't survive well on that kind of a diet. And it brings to mind the line, that famous Jack Nicholson line from A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. And the reality is, for the most part, we can't for very long. It overwhelms us. For most of us live somewhere not on the mountaintop, but maybe on the mountainside or in the valley, where we experience death and separation and alienation and those things that are a part of our reality. But we glimpse for a moment the promise that has been made to us, that through our baptism, we become the light of Christ. And for a moment we recognize on the Mount of Transfiguration that promise that has been given to us through our baptism, that we are to shine brightly as the light of Christ in the world, and that may be part of our journey, my individual journey, your own experience of Lent, is about rediscovering how that light is to shine, how we are called to be the holy people of God, and how in the midst of all of that, we are the light of Christ. Some would say that the true meaning of the Transfiguration is that in the dark night of earthly hopelessness and meaninglessness and brokenness, the light of God always shines, and the human heart finds in God the power which turns your living into victory and your dying into resurrection. Christ's light may be seen through each and every one of us. It is our calling. It is who we are called to be as the holy people of God. Amen.